Have you ever witnessed a moment of shocking arrogance? A moment where someone in power lets their true colors show, thinking there will be no consequences? What if that single moment of unbridled prejudice was directed at the one person you should never, ever cross? We're about to tell you the story of Captain Rick Morrison, a veteran pilot with a flawless record and a deep-seated contempt he thought he could hide. But on Apex Air Flight 714, from New York to London, his carefully constructed world came crashing down when he chose the wrong passenger to bully a quiet, unassuming black woman in seat 4B. He had no idea he wasn't just yelling at a passenger. He was confronting the architect of his own ruin. Stay with us as we unpack how one man's bigotry led to the most spectacular self-destruction in aviation history. The air in the Apex Air Polaris lounge at JFK was a symphony of quiet efficiency. Muted conversations blended with the clink of ceramic on saucer and the soft hiss of an espresso machine. Dr. Evelyn Grace sat in a plush leather armchair by the panoramic window, watching the ballet of ground crews and taxiing jets against the gray New York sky. She wasn't indulging in the complimentary champagne or gourmet canapés. Instead, she nursed a simple bottle of water, her focus entirely on the tablet resting on her lap. The screen glowed with the complex financials of a multi-billion-dollar merger with British aviation giant Sterling Airways. This deal was her baby. As the newest and youngest member of the Apex Air Board of Directors, this was her first major initiative. She had championed it, fought for it, and now she was flying to London to sign the final papers. It would secure Apex's future for the next 50 years. For this reason, she had deliberately booked a business-class seat, not a first-class suite. She wanted to experience the airline's premium product as a customer, to see the operation from the ground up, to notice the little things. Excellence, she believed, wasn't just in the boardroom. It was in every passenger interaction. Her boarding group was called. As she queued, she noticed the flight crew gathering near the gate. The captain, a man with a silver-tinged crew cut, and a chest puffed with the self-importance of 1,000 safe landings, was holding court. His name tag read, R. Morrison. He was laughing loudly with a junior flight attendant, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut through the lounge's ambience. You just have to be firm with them from the start. Mark, Captain Morrison said, his voice carrying more than he likely intended. Especially on these transatlantic routes, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Think they own the plane because they paid for a flatbed. Evelyn felt a familiar, subtle prickle of unease. The comment was vague, yet the undertone was not. She had heard variations of it her whole life. As she presented her boarding pass, the gate agent smiled warmly. "Enjoy your flight, Dr. Grace." Captain Morrison's eyes flickered towards her for a fraction of a second. There was no recognition, just a quick, dismissive scan. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, she heard him mutter to the other pilot, "Let's get this show on the road. The sooner we're up, the sooner we're down." The cabin of the Boeing 777 was sleek and modern. Evelyn found her seat 4B, an aisle seat in the forward business cabin. She stowed her carry-on, a well-worn leather briefcase, in the overhead bin, and settled in. She was engrossed in her documents when a young flight attendant with kind eyes and a name tag that read Sarah offered her a pre-departure beverage. "Can I get you some champagne, ma'am? Or perhaps some orange juice?" Sarah asked with a genuine smile. "Just water for now." "Thank you, Sarah," Evelyn replied, returning the smile. As Sarah turned to assist another passenger, Captain Morrison's voice boomed over the intercom. It was a classic pilot's voice, deep resonant and laced with an unshakable confidence that was meant to be reassuring. "Good morning, folks. This is your Captain Rick Morrison speaking. Welcome aboard Apex Air Flight 714 with non-stop service to London Heathrow. Flight time tonight will be a brisk 6 hours and 40 minutes. We've got clear skies ahead, so we're expecting a smooth ride. The wonderful cabin crew will be coming around shortly to take care of you. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the Apex experience." The speech was standard, yet something about his tone rubbed Evelyn the wrong way. It felt less like a welcome and more like a declaration of his absolute dominion over the metal tube they were all sitting in. The boarding process continued. A man in a crumpled suit huffed as he tried to jam an oversized bag into the bin above Evelyn's seat. It wouldn't fit. He grumbled, trying again and again. Sarah, the flight attendant, hurried over. "Sir, I'm afraid that bag will need to be checked. We can take it from here and have it for you at the gate in London." No, it'll fit," the man insisted, red-faced. The commotion caught the attention of Captain Morrison, who had just stepped out of the cockpit to have a final word with the lead purser. He strode down the aisle with an air of annoyance. He didn't address the struggling passenger. Instead, his eyes landed on Evelyn's briefcase in the adjacent bin space. "Whose is this?" he barked, pointing. Evelyn looked up from her tablet. "It's mine, Captain." He opened the bin, pulled her briefcase out, and looked at it with disdain. "This can go under your seat. The bins are for proper luggage." Without waiting for a response, he dropped it at her feet with a thud that made her flinch. He then turned to the other man. "There. Now your bag will fit." The passenger, embarrassed, quickly shoved his bag in and sat down. Morrison gave a curt nod as if he had just solved a complex international crisis and stalked back to the cockpit. Sarah rushed over her face a mask of apology. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. He shouldn't have done that. Let me stow this for you properly." "It's quite all right, Sarah." Evelyn said, her voice even and calm, though a cold anger was beginning to simmer beneath the surface. "Thank you." She watched Sarah place her briefcase back in the overhead bin, securing it carefully. It was a small incident, a minor abuse of authority. But to Evelyn, it was a data point, a crack in the facade of the Apex experience. She had a feeling it was not going to be the last one. She picked up her tablet, but the numbers and charts now seemed secondary. She was no longer just a board member auditing the service. She was a black woman who had just been singled out and treated with casual contempt by the man flying the plane. And the flight had not yet even left the ground. The ascent from JFK was smooth. The 707 punched through the low-hanging clouds into a brilliant, sun-drenched stratosphere. Below the Atlantic, stretched out like a vast, wrinkled blue sheet. The cabin settled into the familiar rhythm of a long-haul flight, the hum of the engines, the clinking of the dinner service, the glow of screens in the darkened cabin. Evelyn, determined to focus, tried to immerse herself in the merger documents. But the captain's earlier behavior had planted a seed of disquiet that she couldn't shake. It was the casual nature of the disrespect, the assumption that her belongings were less important, that she was an obstacle to be cleared. An hour into the flight, the meal service began. Sarah, ever professional, knelt beside her seat. "Doctor, Grace, for your main course, we have the pan-seared salmon or the beef short rib. Which would you prefer?" "The salmon sounds lovely." "Thank you," Evelyn said. When the meal arrived, it was beautifully presented. However, Upon tasting the fish, Evelyn noted it was unusually salty, almost inedible. Ordinarily, she would have said nothing, but her purpose on this flight was to observe. This was a quality control issue, a flaw in the premium service Apex was selling for thousands of dollars. When Sarah came by to clear the plates, she asked, "How was everything?" Ma'am Evelyn decided to be honest, but gentle. "Sarah, you have been wonderful. But I should mention the salmon was incredibly salty. I'm not sure if it was just my portion, but it might be something the catering service should be aware of." Sarah's face fell. "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that. Can I get you the short rib instead? Or perhaps a cheese plate?" "No, thank you, this is fine. I just thought the feedback would be useful," Evelyn replied, giving her a reassuring smile. Sarah nodded clearly, taking the feedback seriously. "I'll make a note of it in my flight report, Dr. Grace. Thank you for letting me know." Evelyn thought that was the end of it. It was a minor complaint, professionally handled by the cabin crew. She turned back to her work. About 20 minutes later, however, a shadow fell over her. It was Captain Morrison. He had emerged from the cockpit and was standing over her. His arms crossed, a sneer twisting his lips. "I hear you have a problem with our food," he said, his voice low, but carrying an unmistakable edge of aggression. Evelyn was taken aback. A captain leaving the cockpit to address a meal complaint was highly irregular. "Excuse me." "The salmon," he said, his voice rising slightly. "My crew is busy enough without having to deal with frivolous complaints. It's airline food, not a 5-star restaurant. What did you expect?" The passengers in the surrounding seats began to notice. The quiet hum of the cabin was disrupted by this sudden, tense confrontation. Evelyn maintained her composure, her voice steady and professional. "Captain, I simply gave some feedback to the flight attendant when she asked. It was not a complaint, merely an observation about the catering." "An observation?" Morrison scoffed, making air quotes with his fingers. "You people are always looking for something to complain about, aren't you? Always wanting something for free. Is that what this is about? You want a voucher. A few thousand frequent flyer miles to make up for your salty fish." The phrase "you people" hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It was no longer about the food. It was never about the food. Evelyn's spine stiffened. Every person of color knows that phrase and the venom it carries. It was a verbal blade designed to separate and diminish. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice now dangerously quiet. "My feedback was not a request for compensation. It was intended to be constructive. Your tone, however, is unprofessional and completely out of line." Morrison leaned in closer, his face turning ruddy with anger. He was used to absolute authority, to his word being law. The quiet defiance from the woman in 4B was like a lit match to a short fuse. "Out of line, I'll tell you what's out of line," he hissed, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more menacing. "It's people like you in seats you clearly can't afford, thinking you can criticize my flight and my crew. I run this ship, and on my ship, we don't have room for disruptive, entitled passengers." Sarah rushed forward, her face pale. "Captain, please, I can handle this." He waved her away without even looking at her. "Stay out of this, Sarah." He turned his glare back to Evelyn. "I don't know how you got this ticket, but your attitude needs a serious adjustment. One more word out of you and I'll have you restrained for interfering with a flight crew." The threat was absurd, a wild abuse of power. Interference with a flight crew was a federal offense. He was threatening her with a crime for providing feedback on a meal. In the seat across the aisle, a young man Leo had discreetly propped his phone up against his water bottle. The small red light of the recording function was blinking almost imperceptibly. Evelyn looked Captain Morrison directly in the eye. The boardroom had taught her how to handle bullies and egomaniacs. You don't shout, you don't cry. You let them exhaust themselves on their own rage. You let them give you all the rope they need. "Are you finished, Captain?" she asked, her voice as cold and clear as the stratosphere outside the window. Her calmness seemed to enrage him even more. It was a denial of the power he was trying to exert over her. "No, I'm not finished," he spat. "In fact, I think we're done here. You're a liability. When we land in London, you can explain your disruptive behavior to the authorities." He turned on his heel and stormed back toward the cockpit, leaving a wake of stunned silence in the cabin. Passengers exchanged shocked glances. Sarah looked like she was about to cry. Evelyn simply took a slow, deep breath. She looked down at her tablet, at the multi-billion-dollar deal that rested on her shoulders. Captain Rick Morrison hadn't just insulted a passenger. He had just declared war on a director of his own airline, and in his blind bigotry he had absolutely no idea. The firestorm was just beginning. The heavy soundproof door to the cockpit clicked shut behind Captain Morrison, but the chill he had left behind permeated the business-class cabin. The hushed, comfortable atmosphere was gone, replaced by a palpable tension. Passengers whispered to each other, casting uneasy glances toward seat 4B. They had all witnessed the captain's unhinged tirade, and now Evelyn Grace was the unwilling center of their anxious attention. Sarah Jenkins approached her seat, her movements hesitant, her professional demeanor shattered. She knelt, her voice a trembling whisper. "Dr. Grace, I am mortified. I have never in 5 years of flying seen a captain behave that way. I am so sorry. I will be filing a full report." Evelyn offered her a small, tight smile. "It's not your fault, Sarah. You have been nothing but professional. Please don't put yourself in his line of fire." "But it's not right," Sarah insisted, her eyes welling up. "He can't treat people this way." "No, he can't," Evelyn agreed softly. "And he won't." The conviction in her voice seemed to steady the young flight attendant. Sarah nodded, gave Evelyn's arm a light, supportive squeeze, and retreated to the galley. Evelyn tried to return to her work, but the adrenaline coursing through her veins made it impossible to concentrate on financial projections. Morrison's words echoed in her mind. "You people. Seats you clearly can't afford. Disruptive. It was a textbook case of racial profiling and classist arrogance, a toxic cocktail she knew all too well. But she had never experienced it with such blatant aggression from someone in such a position of power over her immediate safety. 20 minutes passed. Then the intercom crackled to life again. It was Captain Morrison's voice, but the reassuring baritone was gone. It was replaced by a cold, clipped tone that dripped with menace. "Ladies and gentlemen, your captain speaking. Due to the continued disruptive behavior of a passenger in the business class cabin, we are currently experiencing a challenge to the safety and security of this flight. I have been in contact with our operations center and with air traffic control. I am officially putting the disruptive individual on notice. Any further non-compliance will be considered interference with the flight crew, and I will be forced to take necessary measures." A collective gasp went through the cabin. He was framing her as a threat to the entire airplane. The message continued, each word a hammer blow of intimidation. "For the safety of all passengers and crew, I am considering diverting this aircraft to the nearest suitable airport, which would be Shannon, Ireland. Upon landing, the passenger will be met by local law enforcement and removed from the flight. We will then refuel and continue to London, albeit with a significant delay. The decision to divert rests entirely on the continued compliance of the passenger in question. He didn't name her, but he didn't have to. Every head turned to look at the black woman in seat 4B. He had weaponized the entire plane against her, painting her as the sole reason they might all be hours late, their plans ruined. It was a masterful act of public shaming and a gross abuse of his authority. Evelyn felt a surge of cold fury. The merger meeting was in less than 12 hours. A diversion to Ireland would be catastrophic. She would miss it. The deal could be jeopardized, and years of work could unravel, all because a pilot couldn't handle a comment about salty fish from a woman he'd already decided was beneath him. This was his point of no return. He had escalated a personal grudge into an international incident, logging official communications and threatening a multi-million-dollar asset, the flight itself, to settle a score. Sarah and the lead purser, Mark, emerged from the galley. Mark, an older man with a weary expression, looked terrified. He had clearly been instructed by Morrison. He approached Evelyn's seat with trepidation. "Ma'am," he began, avoiding her eyes. "The captain has instructed me to inform you that you are to remain in your seat. You are not to speak unless spoken to, and you are to comply with all crew instructions without question." It was a script delivered under duress. Evelyn looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "Mark, are you and the rest of the cabin crew comfortable with the captain's assessment? Do you personally feel that I am a threat to the safety of this flight?" Mark swallowed hard, his eyes darting around nervously. "Ma'am, we are just following the captain's orders." "I see," Evelyn said, her voice dangerously soft. She knew he was in an impossible position. But his compliance, his refusal to stand up to the captain's madness, was also a data point. It revealed a weakness in the crew culture, an environment where a captain's tyranny could go unchecked. She looked out the window at the deep, star-dusted blackness of the sky over the Atlantic. Morrison was trying to isolate her, to intimidate her into silence. He thought he was cornering a helpless passenger. He had no idea he was cornering a lioness. She would not let him divert this plane. She would not let him jeopardize the future of the company. She made a decision. She would not engage further. She would not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She leaned back in her seat, closed her eyes, and feigned sleep. Let him stew in his own impotent rage. Let him think he had won. Let him log his false reports and make his empty threats. Because she knew something he didn't. The real battle wouldn't be fought at 35,000 feet. It would be fought on the ground, in a place where her authority far surpassed his. He had made his move a reckless, career-ending gambit. Now she would wait for hers. The plane flew on through the darkness, a silver needle threading its way toward London, carrying a bully his victim, and the silent digital recording of a man's spectacular undoing. The rest of the flight was shrouded in a tense, suffocating silence. The cabin crew moved like ghosts, their faces strained, avoiding Evelyn's section of the cabin as much as possible. No one dared to speak to her. Captain Morrison had successfully made her a pariah. Evelyn remained perfectly still, her eyes closed, though her mind was racing, planning her next moves with the precision of a chess grandmaster. As the first light of dawn broke over the Irish Sea, the plane began its descent into London. The familiar chime sounded, and Captain Morrison's voice returned to the intercom, this time filled with a smug, victorious finality. "Folks, we've begun our final descent into London Heathrow. Cabin crew, please prepare for landing. I want to thank you for your cooperation during what was at times a challenging flight. For those of you connecting ground staff, will be available to assist. And for the passenger in seat 4B, please remain in your seat after we have docked at the gate. You will be escorted off the aircraft." He had done it. He had called the authorities. He was so convinced of his own righteousness, so blinded by his prejudice, that he was walking himself right off a cliff. Evelyn felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her. The time for silent observation was over. The landing was smooth. As the 777 taxied towards the terminal, Evelyn discreetly took out her phone. She ignored the flurry of emails about the merger and navigated to her contacts. She scrolled past David Chen, CEO, and Apex Legal Counsel. Those were cannons, and this situation required a scalpel. She found the number she was looking for, Sir Alan Pierce, Heathrow Ops Director. Alan was an old acquaintance, a sharp, no-nonsense operator she had worked with while structuring Apex's new terminal lease. The plane docked at Gate 17 with a gentle bump. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Passengers began to stir, eager to deplane, but a palpable sense of morbid curiosity kept many of them in their seats waiting for the promised drama. As promised, 2 uniformed Metropolitan Police officers and a stern-looking airport official appeared at the aircraft door. Captain Rick Morrison emerged from the cockpit, a triumphant smirk on his face. He strode into the business-class cabin like a conquering hero. "There she is, officers," he announced, pointing a damning finger at Evelyn. "That's the one. Caused nothing but trouble from the moment she stepped on board. Belligerent, non-compliant, and a clear threat. I want her formally charged with interference with a flight crew." The officers exchanged a look. They approached her seat with a professional but weary caution. "Ma'am, would you mind coming with us? The captain has made a serious allegation." Evelyn didn't move. She held up her phone, her thumb hovering over Alan Pierce's name. She looked at Captain Morrison, her eyes holding his for the first time, with the full, unshielded weight of her authority. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice clear and ringing through the silent cabin. "Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? I am giving you one final opportunity to retract your statement and apologize to me and to your crew for your deeply unprofessional conduct." Morrison laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Apologize to you. You're in no position to be making demands. You're finished. Now get off my plane." "Very well," Evelyn said. She pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before a crisp British voice answered. "Alan Pierce." "Alan, it's Evelyn Grace," she said calmly, the sound of her own name shifting the air in the cabin. Morrison's smirk flickered. He'd heard the name but couldn't place it. "Evelyn. Good to hear from you, though. I expect you're usually still in the air this time of day." "Everything all right?" "Not quite, Alan. I'm on my own aircraft. Apex 714 at your gate 17. The captain, a Rick Morrison, has refused to let me deplane and has called the police to have me arrested." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "He's done what to you, Evelyn, as in Dr. Evelyn Grace from the Apex Board of Directors." The very same Evelyn confirmed, her eyes locked on Morrison. The captain's face went slack. The color drained from it, leaving a pasty, sickly white. The name connected with the title, Board of Directors, finally clicked into place. It was a cognitive explosion in his mind, the shattering of his entire reality. The disruptive woman, the entitled person in a seat she couldn't afford, was one of his ultimate bosses. On the phone, Alan Pierce was already barking orders. "Stay right where you are, Evelyn. I'm looking at the gate feed now. I can see you. I'm dispatching my senior manager and getting on the line with Apex Corporate Security this instant. Tell the Met officers to stand by and await my arrival." "Will do, Alan." "Thank you," Evelyn said, and disconnected the call. She looked at the two police officers who were now looking back and forth between her and the utterly shell-shocked captain. "Officers," Evelyn said gently, "Sir Alan Pierce, the airport's Director of Operations, is on his way. He has requested that you stand by." One of the officers, realizing the situation had changed dramatically, nodded and discreetly spoke into his radio. Captain Morrison was frozen, his mouth slightly agape. His mind was scrambling, trying to rewind the last 7 hours, to unsay the words, to undo the actions. He looked at Evelyn, and for the first time he didn't see a target for his prejudice. He saw a powerful executive, a judge, and an executioner all rolled into one. He saw the end of his career. The young man across the aisle. Leo slowly lowered his phone, a look of pure astonishment on his face. He knew he hadn't just recorded an ugly incident. He had captured the precise moment a man's world had crumbled into dust, authored entirely by his own hand. The twist had been delivered, and the karma was just beginning its descent. The next 10 minutes unfolded in a surreal, slow-motion tableau of escalating panic for Rick Morrison and methodical calm for Evelyn Grace. The cabin, once a stage for Morrison's power trip, now felt like a cage of his own making. Sir Alan Pierce, a man whose brisk walk suggested he measured his life in seconds, arrived with 2 Apex air-ground executives in tow. Their faces were grim. Alan immediately took charge. "Officers, thank you for your patience. This is an internal Apex matter now. We won't be needing your assistance further," he said, dismissing them with a polite nod. He then turned to Evelyn. "Dr. Grace, on behalf of Heathrow, I am so sorry for this welcome. Please, let's get you to your meeting. Your car is waiting." Evelyn rose from her seat, a picture of Grace under pressure. She picked up her leather briefcase. "Thank you, Alan. I appreciate your swiftness." As she made her way to the door, she paused beside the ashen-faced captain. The Apex executives, a man named Robert Vale and a woman named Jessica Chen, no relation to the CEO, but a rising star in UK operations, stood flanking him. They looked at him with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Morrison, snapping out of his stupor, took a desperate step forward. "Dr. Grace! I had no idea. It was a misunderstanding, the stress of the flight. I can explain." Evelyn stopped and looked at him not with anger, but with a profound and chilling disappointment. "Captain Morrison," she began, her voice devoid of emotion. "There was no misunderstanding. You understood perfectly that you were speaking to a black woman, and you made a series of assumptions based on that. You assumed I was poor. You assumed I was looking for a handout. You assumed you could intimidate me, bully me, and threaten me with impunity. The only thing you didn't know was my job title. And if that is the only thing that would have changed your behavior, then the problem is far worse than I imagined." She let the words hang in the air. "Your stress does not give you license for bigotry. Your seniority is not a shield for abuse. You created a hostile and unsafe environment for a passenger you lied in your official communications, and you attempted to use law enforcement as a tool for personal retaliation. Most alarmingly, you threatened to divert a multi-million-dollar aircraft carrying over 200 souls to settle a personal vendetta over a piece of fish. You did not have a misunderstanding, Captain. You had a catastrophic failure of character and judgment." She turned to Robert Vale, the senior Apex executive. Mr. Vale, Captain Morrison is to be relieved of duty effective immediately. Find a replacement crew for the return flight to JFK. He is not to step foot in a cockpit of an Apex aircraft, again pending a full and thorough investigation. His credentials and access are to be suspended. I want a preliminary report on my desk before I even leave London. Is that understood? Yes, Dr. Grace. Absolutely. Vale said, his voice tight. Evelyn gave a final sharp nod and deplaned without a backward glance, flanked by Alan Pierce. The moment the jet bridge door closed, the dam of Morrison's composure broke. He turned to Vale, his voice a frantic, pleading whine. Robert, you can't let her do this. I have 30 years with this airline. 30 years. A perfect record. You know me. I thought I did. Rick Vale said, his expression like stone. What in God's name were you thinking, threatening to divert? Calling the cops on a board member, on any passenger over something so trivial? It was then that Sarah, the flight attendant, stepped forward, her fear finally eclipsed by her sense of duty. Mr. Vale, sir. It was worse than that. His language. It was racist. He used the phrase, "you people." He was aggressive and threatening from the beginning. I was going to file a report regardless of who she was. Mark, the senior purser, now seeing which way the wind was blowing, quickly chimed in. She's right. The captain was completely out of control. We were all concerned by his erratic behavior. Morrison stared at them, his eyes wide with betrayal. These were his crew, the people who were supposed to back his play. But his tyranny had evaporated the moment a higher power was revealed. Just then the young passenger Leo approached the executives. "Excuse me," he said, holding up his phone. "I think you might need to see this." I recorded the whole thing. He pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. Morrison's sneering voice filled the cabin. "You people are always looking for something to complain about, in seats you clearly can't afford. I'll have you restrained for interfering with a flight crew." Robert Vale closed his eyes. Jessica Chen visibly recoiled. For Rick Morrison, it was the final nail in a coffin he had painstakingly built for himself all night. There was no explaining this away. No talking his way out of it. The untouchable veteran pilot had been brought down not by a mechanical failure or a storm, but by a 2-minute video clip on a passenger's phone and a will to decency he had long since abandoned. His unraveling was complete. All that was left was the fall. 3 days later, the news had gone from a viral video clip to a full-blown international media firestorm. Leo's video, posted with the title, "Arrogant Pilot's Racist Rant on Apex Air Flight 714, had amassed millions of views. News outlets from CNN to the BBC had picked up the story. Apex Air's stock had dipped, and its PR department was in full crisis mode. In a sleek, sterile conference room on the 50th floor of Apex Air's Manhattan headquarters, the final act of Rick Morrison's career was about to play out. The room had a single massive oak table, polished to a mirror shine. On one side sat Apex's leadership CEO David Chen, a sharp, impeccably dressed man, known for his progressive vision. Evelyn Grace, who had successfully closed the Sterling Airways merger despite the chaos, and the head of the airline's legal counsel, Maria Flores. On the other side sat Rick Morrison. He was a shrunken figure. The swagger and confidence bled out of him, leaving behind a pale, desperate man in an ill-fitting suit. Next to him sat his union representative, a grim-faced man named Stan, who knew he was there not to win, but to mitigate a slaughter. David Chen began, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of his office. "Captain Morrison, We are here to review the events of Flight 714 on September 24th. We have your official incident report, which claims Dr. Grace was a belligerent and potentially dangerous passenger. We have the corroborating reports from First Officer Evans and the entire cabin crew. We have a formal statement from Dr. Grace. And we have this. Chen gestured to a large monitor at the end of the room. He nodded to an aide, and Leo's video played. The audio, enhanced by the room's state-of-the-art system, was damning. Every sneer, every insult, every venomous syllable filled the space. Morrison flinched as his own voice, dripping with contempt, echoed around him. "I don't know how you got this ticket." When the video ended, an uncomfortable silence descended. Captain Chen continued, his eyes cold. "Your report appears to be a work of fiction. Not a single member of your crew backs your version of events. In fact, flight attendant Sarah Jenkins and lead purser Mark Davies both describe your behavior as unhinged and aggressive. Your first officer, Michael Evans, stated in his report that he advised you against confronting the passenger and strongly opposed your threat to divert the aircraft advice you chose to ignore." Morrison, his voice raspy, tried to speak. "David, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake in judgment. I was under a lot of personal stress. My wife, she's been ill. It's no excuse, I know, but 30 years of service has to count for something. 30 years of perfect safety, of dedication to this company." Evelyn spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through his excuses. "Captain Morrison, does your personal stress often manifest as racism? Because your behavior did not begin with the meal. It began at the gate in New York. You made a disparaging comment about transatlantic passengers. You then singled out my luggage and handled it with contempt. You established a pattern of disrespect long before the issue with the salmon ever occurred. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was an expression of a deep-seated prejudice you felt comfortable displaying because you believed there would be no consequences." Stan, the union rep, cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Dr. Grace Captain Morrison is prepared to issue a formal apology. He is willing to attend sensitivity and anger management training. He is a senior pilot with an invaluable amount of experience. Firing him would be a loss to the company." Maria Flores, the lawyer, finally spoke, her words precise and sharp. "Mr. Kowalski, your client didn't just insult a passenger who by a twist of fate happened to be a board member. He committed a litany of terminable offenses. He left the cockpit during a non-critical phase of flight to confront a passenger over a trivial matter, a violation of protocol. He created a hostile and intimidating environment for passengers and crew. He falsified an official flight incident report. He made a threat to divert an international flight under false pretenses, an act that could have cost this company hundreds of thousands of dollars and triggered a major FAA inquiry. And he attempted to use law enforcement to harass a customer. Which of those exactly does his 30 years of service excuse?" She slid a thick file across the table. "And as for his perfect record, our internal review found 3 prior passenger complaints against him over the last 5 years, all describing him as arrogant, dismissive, and rude. All 3 complaints came from passengers who were people of color. It seems your behavior, Captain, it isn't an anomaly. You've just never been caught on camera before." Morrison deflated completely. The last of his defenses crumbled. He had no allies. His record wasn't perfect. His crew had turned on him. His own words had condemned him. David Chen leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Rick, your 30 years of service didn't teach you the most basic rule of our business. Every single person who steps on our aircraft is to be treated with dignity and respect, not because of their title or the class they are sitting in, but because they are our customers and our responsibility. You failed at that most fundamental level. Your actions have embarrassed this company, endangered our passengers' trust, and exposed us to immense legal and financial liability. Chen stood up, signaling the end of the hearing. Your employment with Apex Air is terminated effective immediately. The words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a guillotine. It was over. Rick Morrison, the untouchable Sky King, was grounded. Forever. The fallout from Rick Morrison's termination was not a single clean event, but a slow, agonizing demolition of a life he had taken for granted. Karma in its truest form was not a lightning bolt from the heavens. It was a cascade of meticulously detailed bureaucratic and deeply personal consequences that stripped him of his past, present, and future. His first taste of this new reality came the day after the hearing. He drove to the Apex Aircrew Operations Center at JFK, a building he had strode through with untouchable confidence for 3 decades. Today, his access card was denied with a flat, impersonal red light. He had to be signed in as a visitor. The walk to clear out his locker was a gauntlet of cold shoulders and averted eyes. Colleagues he had flown with for years, men with whom he'd shared stories of children and mortgages over sterile hotel breakfasts in distant cities, now found the floor tiles intensely fascinating. The silence was more damning than any accusation. He packed 30 years of memories, lapel pins, old flight maps, a faded photo of his younger self beaming in his new captain's uniform into a cardboard box, and walked out under the curious, pitying gaze of a new generation of pilots who only knew him as the man from the video. His meeting with Stan Kowalski, the union representative, was even more brutal. They met in a soulless diner off the Van Wyck Expressway. Stan, a man paid to fight for his members, slid a file across the sticky table and didn't make eye contact. "Rick, my hands are tied," he said, his voice gravelly with resignation. "The video is indefensible. The crew reports are unanimous." First Officer Evans's statement alone paints a picture of gross insubordination and recklessness. "They have you on falsifying an official report. If we fight this, they will countersue you personally for the cost of the litigation, and they will win. The union's board has voted. We cannot represent you in this matter." "So that's it," Morrison sputtered, the coffee turning to acid in his stomach. 30 years of dues. 30 years of flying the line, and you're just cutting me loose because of one bad day." Stan finally looked up, his eyes weary. "This wasn't a bad day. Rick, and you know it. This was a bad philosophy. We can defend a pilot who makes a mistake in the cockpit. We can't defend a man who uses the cockpit as a throne to wage a racist crusade against a passenger. You didn't just break company policy. You broke a basic code of human decency. We're done here." The most devastating blow arrived 2 months later, delivered by a certified mail carrier. It was a thick envelope from the Federal Aviation Administration in Oklahoma City. The language within was cold, clinical, and absolute, citing the evidence provided by Apex Air and its own investigation into the incident, which found his actions demonstrated a lack of care, judgment, and responsibility necessary to hold an airline transport pilot certificate. The FAA was issuing an emergency revocation of his license. The document he had spent his entire adult life earning and maintaining was now null and void. He would never again be the commander of a commercial aircraft. It was a death certificate for his identity. The financial ruin followed with brutal efficiency. The termination for cause nullified the terms of his lucrative pension. His stock options, vested over the next 5 years, were now worthless paper. The public humiliation fanned by the endless replay of the video on cable news and late-night talk shows made any alternative employment impossible. He was a pariah, a living meme for arrogance. He saw a group of teenagers pointing and snickering at him in the grocery store. His wife, who was indeed ill, now faced her health challenges without the top-tier insurance his job had provided, and with the added stress of their community shunning them. The for sale sign on their pristine lawn in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a monument to his failure. They sold the house that represented the pinnacle of his success and moved into a nondescript 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, where the roar of planes from LaGuardia served as a constant, torturous reminder of the world he had lost. But while Morrison's world was shrinking into a bitter, lonely room, Evelyn Grace was ensuring that the aftershocks of Flight 714 created something expansive and new at Apex Air. She refused to allow the company to frame this as the simple removal of one bad apple. In a tense meeting with the executive committee, she argued that a rotten apple is often the product of a compromised barrel. With the full backing of a sobered David Chen, she launched the Apex Ascent initiative. It was not a one-off sensitivity seminar, but a top-to-bottom cultural overhaul. She personally vetted and hired a leading DEI consulting firm, and together they built a multifaceted program. The Morrison video became a central, albeit anonymized, part of the training curriculum for all 80,000 Apex employees, a powerful real-world example of unconscious bias escalating into career-ending misconduct. Pilots underwent advanced simulator training that included challenging crew resource management scenarios where they were graded on their ability to de-escalate conflict and accept feedback from their junior officers and cabin crew. The old quasi-militaristic hierarchy was dismantled in favor of a collaborative safety-first, ego-last model. Sarah Jenkins, the flight attendant who showed quiet courage, became the face of the new culture. She was not only promoted to lead purser ahead of schedule, but was invited to join a new advisory council, providing the cabin crew's perspective directly to senior management. She became a peer mentor, celebrated for her integrity. First Officer Michael Evans was placed on the captain's advancement track, his actions held up in training as the gold standard for co-pilot intervention. Apex was sending a clear message: loyalty was not about blindly following orders. It was about upholding the company's values, even when it meant challenging authority. The results were astonishing. Within a year, internal reports of microaggressions and passenger disputes dropped by over 40%. Passenger satisfaction scores, particularly in premium cabins, soared to record highs. Apex Air's stock not only recovered, but began outperforming its competitors as the company gained a reputation for excellent, respectful service. They won several industry awards for Most Improved Corporate Culture and Best in Customer Care. The company that was briefly the subject of ridicule had become a case study in corporate responsibility. A year after the incident, Evelyn was flying the New York-London route again. As she prepared her documents for the meeting, the captain of the flight emerged from the cockpit. He was a young, sharp-looking African-American man. He walked directly to her seat. "Dr. Grace?" he asked, a respectful and genuine smile on his face. "I'm Captain David Franklin. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I had to come and introduce myself." Evelyn smiled and shook his extended hand. "Captain Franklin, a pleasure to meet you. I trust we'll have a smooth flight." "We will, ma'am," he confirmed. "But I wanted to say thank you. I was a first officer here a year ago, and the atmosphere, it could be challenging. The old guard was set in its ways. After you spearheaded the Ascent initiative, everything changed. The training is real. The conversations are honest. The culture in the cockpit is about collaboration, now not just command. You didn't just get one bad pilot fired. You created a system where a pilot like that can no longer thrive. You made this a better, safer, and more respectful place to work for everyone. It's an honor to be flying you today. Evelyn felt a profound sense of satisfaction, one that went far beyond the schadenfreude of seeing a bully get his due. Morrison's downfall was a necessary consequence, but the true victory was this: the confident, capable man standing before her, the thriving company around her, the positive, lasting change born from a single, ugly moment of hate. She looked out the window as the powerful jet began to push back its engines, spooling up for the journey. The price of prejudice had been steep for Rick Morrison, but the dividend of decency, she realized, was priceless. The story of Captain Morrison and Dr. Evelyn Grace is a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, there are no small acts of prejudice. A moment of hate captured on a phone can unravel a 30-year career and expose the deep flaws within a system. But more importantly, it shows the immense power of composure, integrity, and decisive action. Dr. Grace didn't just win a confrontation. She used it as a catalyst to rebuild a corporate culture, proving that one person's refusal to be victimized can uplift thousands. What did you think of Captain Morrison's karma? Was it deserved? What would you have done in Dr. Grace's position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true-life stories of justice and consequences. Thank you for listening.